Hey, 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 good morning, folks. It's Pastor Steven back again with another No Frills Daily Devotional. And today's topic is protect your yes. And I've kind of opened a can of worms here because I've been talking about spiritual appetites, which led me to a conversation about spiritual disciplines. And this is a big topic and a big concept. And so I want to start to kind of pick at this big topic and this big concept. I'm going to take you right to the text again. I am rereading again Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 16. And this is the passage that I did in a previous episode. But it reads like this: Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths, and where the way is, or where the good way is, and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls. And with this passage, I want us to take a look at the life of Jesus and view that as our ancient path that Jeremiah is talking about, or well, actually, that Jeremiah is writing about. God's talking about it, Jeremiah is writing about it. But this idea that the life of Jesus is our ancient path. That's the good way. That's the way that's going to lead to peace and rest for my soul. And you've heard me say this many, many times, I know, but the Jesus life, it's the only life that brings true fulfillment and true satisfaction, because that's the life that you and I were actually created for, the life that we've been created to live. And so through this talk about spiritual disciplines, I want to take a close examination at the life of Jesus and start to pick out some of the things from his life that we should be applying to our lives. And I kind of hinted at this in the previous episode that I did, that it's not necessarily a knowledge issue. We know, you know what is right. You know the way that is good. Oftentimes for us, it's an application issue. We know what's right, but we don't do it. And why don't we do it, right? That's kind of what I want to pick at today, is what keeps us from living the Jesus life. Well, one of the things that keeps us from living the Jesus life is something called lack of margin. Lack of margin. What is margin? Margin is all these, in my Bible, it's all the space around the text, right? And if you look at my Bible, I have lots of stuff written in the margin, but margin is this room, this extra space that we have that is meant to be left for things in our lives, things that are important. But the problem is, most of us live our lives without any margin. We fill our lives up with so much stuff that consumes our time, our energy, our finances, and our emotions, and we just don't have room, right? And especially when I'm talking to you about spiritual disciplines and telling you, get into scripture, take time to pray, right away you're like, when am I going to have time to do that, Stephen? Right? And so that's what this episode is all about, because we live with a lack of margin, and it comes down to learning something called protecting your yes. And that's what this video is titled, and so I better get into it, right? Protecting your yes. Now, I am guilty of not protecting my yes. This is something that I've had to learn. And if you're like me, my personality is I don't want to let anybody down. And so oftentimes I find myself saying yes to everything and everyone because I don't want to let anybody down. But I remember I was at a football clinic once, believe it or not, and one of the speakers was up there and he was talking about that idea of not wanting to say no. And he said this, he says, when you say yes to something, you are inadvertently saying no to something. And what he was hitting at is something that was actually happening in my life at that time, because I was saying yes to coaching football. I was also saying yes to being an athletic director. I was also saying yes to being a junior high basketball coach. But the problem is I had a beautiful wife and 3 little kids at home that, as I was saying yes to all those things, I was having to say no to them, right? Because all those other things were taking my energy, my time, my focus, all my resources. And I was saying yes, 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 yes to all those things, thinking that I didn't want to let anybody down. But the problem was, is as I was saying yes to all of that, I was saying no to the things that really mattered in my life, right? And that's what protecting our yes is. It's your yeses reveal your priorities, okay? What you say yes to reveals what you view as special and important in your life. And as I was saying yes to all those things regarding football and sports and school, I was saying no to things that really needed to be prioritized in my life. And so yes, we got to protect our yes, and we got to watch our pace, okay? Watch your pace. Not everything, believe it or not, is an emergency, right? Not everything is an emergency, and someone else's emergency doesn't have to be your emergency, right? And it's this idea that oftentimes my phone will go off at weird hours. And if you're a teacher like me, oftentimes it's a parent who's asking a question, and it's like they could find the answer elsewhere, but they text you, the teacher, because it's faster and it's easier for them. But you don't have to respond to that text. You don't have to respond to that email. Someone else's emergency doesn't have to be your emergency. And not everything that a parent thinks of at 5 o'clock in the morning is an emergency, right? And so Jesus, something that I think about often is the pace of Jesus. Jesus lived life at 3 miles per hour. What do I mean by that? Anytime he needed to go somewhere or get somewhere, he had to walk, right? There wasn't an abundance of camels or horses that he had access to, okay? And so when they went from village to village or town to town, it was always at walking speed, right? And we tend to not do that though. We live our life at 80 miles per hour, or 80 is too slow, so let's go 85. Well, 85 is too slow, so let's go at 90, right? Jesus lived at 3 miles per hour. And I want to take you to an interesting passage. This is John chapter 11. And I want to take a look again at the life of Jesus here. And it's this interesting passage about this guy named Lazarus, okay? Now, Lazarus was this guy who was the brother of Mary and Martha, who were part of Jesus's group. And these two gals were very important parts of Jesus' life. And their brother gets sick, and I'm going to pick up here. This is John chapter 11, verse 4. When he heard this, Jesus said, so Jesus is in Bethany. Sorry, I better give a little more context. Jesus is in Bethany, and Lazarus is in Judea. And so they send word to Jesus in Bethany, Lazarus is sick. We need you. Come back now, Jesus, right? When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No. It's for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister, and he loved Lazarus. Yet, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. What is Jesus doing here? He's protecting his yes. They want him to come back, but he's got things he needs to do in Bethany. And he knows that if he says yes to going back to Lazarus, he's got to say no to what he needs to do in Bethany. And so he's protecting his yes right now. And then it's interesting because he waits 2 days, and then he walks back from Bethany to Judea. And I'm going to pick up here on verse 17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. By the time Jesus finally got back to Judea, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days, or in the tomb for 4 days, right? And it's this idea that he didn't let this emergency rattle him, right? And he still lived at 3 miles per hour, and he still protected his yes. And what's interesting, if you read on in the story, Jesus is going to do a miracle. Lazarus is going to be raised from the dead. And it's that he doesn't let these things rattle him. He protected his yes, and he watched his pace. And his life was full, right, of peace and rest. And your life is meant to be full of peace and rest. So protect your yes and watch your pace, and be blessed today, you guys.